What's up, everybody? My name is Scott Waters. Welcome to Live to Metal. Happy New Year 2018. This is the first video for me of this year, and what I'm going to do is some of my favorite 80s EPs. Mostly heavy metal, one or two hard rock ones thrown in here, but these are my favorite EPs. You know, those short albums that weren't quite full-length albums, but they're just great. Because I know people don't like them today. A lot of people don't like them. Back in the 80s, I discovered a lot of bands through compilations and EPs. You know, they are 3, 4, 5 songs, 6 songs even sometimes, and those songs left you wanting for more. You know, you couldn't wait till the next album, the full-length album coming from these bands. And I discovered some killer bands that way, and some of these EPs are just outstanding. They dominated my turntable or back in the 80s, or in my CD player in the late 80s. So let's go ahead and start right away, because I do have a lot to show, and I don't want this to be too long, but I'm going to start off with Blood Feast, New Renaissance Records, this 4-song EP. Raw, guttural thrash, the early roots of death metal in my opinion. Some people call them B-grade Slayer, whatever. Yes, they have some similarities to Slayer. B-grade, I don't think so. I think Blood Feast had their own sound, their own style. Yeah, it was, you know, underground, more underground, wasn't well produced, but it didn't need to be. It was metal. It was all about them. The raw riffing, the speed, the attitude, and that all is built into this little EP. Sounds a lot like their first album. If you like the first album, you probably like the EP, which is their follow-up to that album. I think it's the one and only rock album in here. Former Max Webster guitarist Kim Mitchell's first solo release was an EP, and 5 songs, just straightforward hard rock, guitar-based hard rock. I kind of put it into the same school with stuff like, you know, Pat Travers. This guitar heavy rock and roll. He got a little more poppy after this, but I even like those albums. But anyhow, this album's pretty well respected amongst hard rock and metal fans just because of his association with Max Webster. And it's a very good album. I can't honestly say this is one of the only ones in this pile that I didn't get into until after the 80s. The rest of these were all ones that I just, you know, loved in the 80s. But I wanted to show this one because I feel it's worth showing. And if you're into that guitar-based heavy metal, like heavy metal, hard rock, like, you know, Pat Travers or Ted Nugent, or trying to think of who else might fit into that vein, Joe Perry Project, that kind of thing, you probably would dig this Kim Mitchell EP. Like I said, 5 songs. Mini album contains 5 songs in French and Spanish, because this Spanish, French and Spanish, because this is a Canadian release on the Anthem label, which is a Canadian record label. I believe that Rush and Max Webster were both on that label. Oh, I love this album. This is live at EINDHOVEN Testament live album, off the first album tour. This album featured 5 live songs, just raw, biting, heavy thrash. And I'm not huge on thrash metal live albums. I feel a lot of them are kind of weak, because they're never going to be quite as tight as the studio albums are. And thrash is all about that tight, you know, staccato riffing, the fast machine gun riffing, the solid straight double bass, and all those kind of things, which are difficult to do when you're performing live and have it be perfect. But this album I just really absolutely love. To be honest, the other EP by them that I absolutely love was the Return to the Apocalyptic City, which I would love to have on vinyl. I just have it on CD, unfortunately. This one actually was released as a full-length. I hadn't pulled that as well. This is a full-length release, and you could kind of tell listening to this perhaps why they cut some of the songs, made it an EP, because it's a little sloppy here and there. And I kind of like the fact that they released it the whole way. It's live. It's how you would have heard it. But sometimes EPs like this kind of reminds me of like Foghat Live. It wasn't a long live album, but it was great just the way it was. And that's kind of the way I see it with this live EP from Testament from, what was the year on this one? 87. Oh, now this one was one I hugely anticipated back when it came out. I was a huge fan of this local band called ANTHRAX. And their singer, Neil Turbin, was given his walk-in papers, and we just couldn't wait to hear what the new singer sounded like. the whole bunch of us back then were just big fans of this band. My buddy was in a band called Heathens Rage, and they used to play Anthrax songs from Fistful of Metal, the first album. And we were hanging around the mall one day, and I picked this album up. It was a brand new release. It was like the release day. Couldn't wait to take it home. We took it home, and this album just killed. Of course, five songs, including 2 live songs. I believe they're actually live in the studio. God Save the Queen, which is a cover. But you got Armed and Dangerous, which was really the direction that the band was heading. Speed metal with cleaner vocals from Joey Belladonna, who was the new vocalist. And a song called Raise Hell, which really didn't go anywhere beyond this EP. I believe they played it live a bit, because I remember hearing them play it live back at City Gardens or Lemoore or something like that. But unfortunately, it just never resurrected anywhere else. So, but it's a great song, and it is exclusive to this EP. This EP has been released on CD and re-released with the first 7-inch vinyl, as well as bonus tracks. But that original is just fantastic. 2 from the same band. I think these are both worthy contenders. I love these almost as much as any of their other studio albums, their early studio albums. First 2 albums from Slayer, but this is Haunting the Chapel. 3 songs on the original one. This reissue actually contains the bonus track Aggressive Perfector, which I believe was off the Metal Blade release, Metal Massacre. I can't remember which Metal Massacre it was, 2, 3, some in that area, but regardless, Chemical Warfare, Captor Obscene. Just great stuff on here. I love this little EP, as well as this somewhat live EP. Again, this is not live in front of an audience. The way I understand it, it's live in the studio, and there was, of course, people there watching and listening. But you got 6 songs here, studio recordings and recorded live. Black Magic, Die by the Sword, and Captor of Sin live, and then Haunting the Chapel, Antichrist, and Fight Till Death. Both these EPs are fantastic. I can't tell you how many times I played them back in the day when I was in high school. So this one, again, later discovery for me, but not quite as late as that Kid Mitchell one. This is HIRAX, Hate, Fear, Power. Now, how do you consider this one an EP? It's got, how many songs does this thing have on it? 8 songs. Most of these songs are 2 or 2.5 minutes long. This was HIRAX in their early days. Thrash, yes, but more of a crossover sound. Huge punk influence. The songs are short. Punch you in the face and leave. Kate DePena, vocalist, had a snotty, punky style of singing that was very unique. One of the few black guys in metal, but just a great singer and a very cool guy. I've actually got to meet him a few times, actually. Another band that my buddy Glenn Rogers was in for a while, and he wrote several songs with them and released several albums with them. But anyhow, this EP, fantastic. If you're into crossover or thrash, well worth checking into. Hate, Fear, and Power, HIRAX. Rushing through these things. This is Obsession, Martial Law. Brilliant. US power metal. Again, kind of has that sound, unlike Metal Church or Heretic or Reverend. Just that walks the line between traditional heavy metal and thrash metal. I wouldn't call you guys thrash by any stretch of the imagination, but they had that vibe that almost pushed it to that side. US power metal. Martial Law featured 4 songs, I believe. Let's see here. Yeah, 4 songs. The Execution, Martial Law, Only the Strong Will Survive, and Hatred Unto Death. Of course, the singer for Mike Viscera went on to sing with Loudness and Yngwie Malmsteen and several other bands in the future, but I like Obsession a lot. They're one of my favorite US power metal bands, but Martial Law is still my favorite. It's just a short, again, punch you in the face and walk away. It's like, it leaves you wanting for more, and that's what I'm hearing here. You know, you hear them 4 songs and you're like, you want to play it again. I mean, it's just that good. And I remember hearing this back in the 80s and just being blown away by it. The shredding guitar solos, the screaming, soaring vocals, and you get all that with this. You know, this is classic 80s heavy metal, and this is on Metal Blade Records, so I can't remember the year on this one. It's like 88, I'm thinking. Seems there's a year on here somewhere. I don't see it. Anyhow, moving on. This is the OMEN Nightmares EP from '87, excuse me. And again, we got 6 songs on this one, including a cover of AC/DC's Whole Lotta Rosie. I really like OMEN, and I really like this EP. I almost didn't include it because it didn't quite I shouldn't say I didn't like it. I love it, actually. However, much like the Kim Mitchell, it wasn't one that I really grabbed onto when I was younger, but in more recent years, I've listened to it quite a bit. I think it's very, very good. So I figured if I showed the Kim Mitchell, I could show this one too, right? Even if I wasn't into it in the 80s, it is an 80s EP, and it's a very good one from a classic metal band. I always considered OMEN and Lizzie Borden to be like the house bands on Metal Blade Records, and rightly so. They're both great bands, and they both released a ton of good material. So, like I said, 6 songs, including a really cool cover of Whole Lotta Rosie by AC/DC. Kenny Powell, J.D. Kimball on vocals, who has since passed away. Great EP, again, just straightforward U.S. heavy metal. Also, straightforward U.S. heavy metal. This is Saint, Warriors of the Sun. I believe this was 6 songs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 songs EP. This one has 2 different covers. Was released on a couple different labels. This was released back in like '84, I think, and just like I said, straightforward heavy metal, very Judas Priest inspired. A lot of people call him a Judas Priest clone. I think that's more so because of Josh Kramer's soaring Halford-esque vocals than anything else. But Josh Kramer vocals here, and then you've got Richard Lynch over here, bass player. Richard Lynch basically kept this band alive. You know, they put out 3 great albums in the 80s, disappeared for a little while, came back, put out an album that wasn't so good, and then they went back to their roots, and they've just put out a ton of great heavy metal all through the late 90s into the 2000s. This is well worth picking up if you're in the traditional, classic heavy metal. American heavy metal band, Saint, Warriors of the Sun. This one's cheating a little bit. I'm going to show 2 albums from this band. I'm going to show this one first. Is an EP? Yeah, it's more of a single. Creeping Death, 12-inch single. But the B-side is actually the Garage Days EP, featuring Am I Evil and Blitzkrieg, 2 cover songs. And I can't tell you how many times I listened to that B-side when I first purchased this as a new release. Freaking awesome. And this is the album that I actually discovered Diamond Head off of. I really didn't know Diamond Head. I mean, I was really into a lot of, you know, Saxon and Def Leppard and, you know, all those well-known Iron Maiden bands that came out of that movement. But back in whenever this came out, what was this, like 84 when this came out, I think, or somewhere in that area. I wasn't familiar with Diamond Head, and I heard Am I Evil, and I was just blown away. So they became another favorite of mine. And Blitzkrieg too. I didn't know who Blitzkrieg was. 2 great songs by 2 new wave of British heavy metal bands. On the B side of this is the original Garage Days Revisited EP, but it's also the Creeping Death 12-inch single. And of course, the the first album to feature Jason Newsted from Flotsam and Jetsam on bass. This was a EP of covers as well. This was the Garage Days Revisited, so this is the follow-up to that other one. Again, we featured all covers, 5 songs: The Helpless, Small Hours, The Wait, Crash Course and Brain Surgery, and Last Caress and Green Hell. If you grew up with Metallica, and they were one of your favorite bands, like they were one of mine back in the early 80s. This album was one of those that just dominated. I mean, it was very good, and it's still very good. One of the best things that they recorded, and probably one of the best things that they recorded with Jason on bass. So, a little live EP from Riot. This is just a fantastic live album from one of the most underrated American heavy metal bands. You know, coming out at the end of the 70s, being one of the heavier bands in the late 70s, and rising to some, you know, to a bit of fame by the early 80s, playing some of the big festivals, but never quite getting over that fence and becoming one of the, you know, truly big bands. You know, not even getting like as big as like bands like Saxon or any of those bands that were coming out of that late 70s and early 80s movement. It's unfortunate for them that they never did, but this was an early release from them, 1982, 6-song live EP. Of course, Swords of Tequila is probably one of their most well-known songs. I actually hear that one on the local radio station at times. So, great live album from them. There's actually this terrible album cover, obviously, but there's actually another version of this. I don't even know if it's the same exact show, but it features a full, you know, a longer set list. But again, sometimes EPs are just perfect the way they are. You don't need to put anything else on them, and that's the case with this one. It's just perfect the way it is. I love this Riot live album. So, yeah, moving on. Again, I'm going to cheat a little bit with this one. This first one is definitely EP from 1981, I believe it was, or was it 82? It might have been 82. This is Crash Bang Wallop by Raven. High intensity, lunacy, which Raven are, speed metal, athletic rock, whatever the heck you want to call them. Nobody sounded like Raven coming out of that new era British heavy metal movement. You know, they were just one of a very, they were a very unique animal. You know, just foaming at the mouth, of a rabbit, and just, you know, devouring anything in its path. These guys were one of the hopefuls of that movement, and indeed they did rise to a bit of fame, even though they kind of lost it when they did finally get on the bigger label. But those first 3 albums and the EPs and singles that were released during that time just can't be touched. Brilliant stuff here. This is a 3-4 song EP, and it's got Crash Bang Wallop, which is one of their signature songs, rock hard, with Mark on lead vocals, Mark Gallagher instead of John, Run Them Deep, and Firepower, which Firepower was actually from the album Wiped Out. And this EP was basically leftover tracks from the Wiped Out album to begin with. So I bought this as a new release back then. I was in high school when this came out, played it over and over and over again. I believe I had it on green vinyl. This one's on colored vinyl too. Can't remember the color, that's not important right now. Yeah, great album. You can see what they had out at the time. Their discography at the time consisted of all neat records, 2 7-inch singles, and 2 albums. All brilliant. As well, this was more of a single. Okay, this is much like the Metallica I showed earlier. This is the Break the Chain single, but it featured a B-side of 2 songs that were never released before, and man, those 2 songs are just over the top awesome. I mean, Born to be Wild, which is, you know, everybody's covered Born to be Wild. However, this is one of the most over-the-top crazy covers of Born to be Wild you'll ever hear, with Udo Dirkschneider from Accept sharing vocals with John Gallagher. I mean, these guys are just screaming, high-pitched, shattering glass, and then the music is just, you know, grinding. Mark Gallagher's guitar tone just shredding, and of course you got Wacko Hunter on drums, and let's say whatever, Wacko, crazy drummer. The whole song is just freaking fantastic. Then you got a re-recorded version of Inquisitor with, again, you got Udo Dirkschneider doing some of the vocals on here. What a killer song. It's just a shame they didn't also have the Ballad of Marshall Stack on this EP as well. That was released on something else, but regardless, classic 3-song EP from Raven from 1983. This is a Roadrunner release. So again, this band has 2 releases. I'm going to show them in reverse order, of not chronological order, but the ones that, this is Mass, Take You Home. This is the album that I discovered this band on. I love this album. First of all, it's got 6 songs, and 2 of them I just find to be awesome. If I did a top 100 metal songs ever, 2 of these songs would probably make my list. The one that opens up, Pedal to the Metal, it's just a great heavy metal track. Memorable, hooky, killer vocals from Louis St. August, which he's right, where are you, Louis? There he is. And heavy guitar tones. It's just a very good EP. A lot of people didn't like their New Birth album, the one that preceded this. I did, but I just think this was a step up from there. Better production, better sound, better songwriting even. And the other song I would pick is Holy One. Now that song is more slow, more, if I can use the word, worshipful. And people often say that this is a Christian band. I don't think so. I'm not saying that I don't know what their beliefs are. It doesn't really make a difference. Their lyrics tend to be about everything from cars to girls and relationships. And Holy One, however, does seem to be one of those kind of worship songs, a song written to God. But there's just something majestic about that song. Something I can't even put into words. But great EP. Every song on here is worth, worth owning. This is one of those albums, whenever I see it, I always buy it. If I run across a copy anywhere, I buy it, and I usually give it away to somebody. I just recently gave one away to a friend, Darren Hildebrandt, in Canada. It's just that good. I want people to turn people onto it, because I just think once you hear this, you're going to want to hear more from this band. As well, this is their very first EP. This is still sealed and will never be opened. Unfortunately, it's just one of those collector's things that I never owned back in the day until it came out on CD, but was so glad to finally get a copy sealed on vinyl. A 4-song EP. The band recorded an album in 1982, I believe it was, with Judas Priest producer. I can't remember the name of the producer off the top of my head. Whatever. Anyhow, they recorded an album for A&M Records, and for whatever reason, Mass's manager was duking it out with A&M Records, so the album was never released. It was shelved, and no one ever got to hear it. So instead of, you know, resting on their laurels or getting bummed out and quitting, the band toughed it out and recorded their own EP, and this thing sold like gangbusters for them. Band out of Boston, and they just sold these independently, and they sold thousands and thousands of them on their own. And it's a very good album. It's different from New Birth, in my opinion. It's got a more raw, heavy sound. New Birth, actually, some of these songs probably made it onto, because Pedal to the Metal is on here, and Holy One, which of course made it onto that later album. Still of the Night, which is not a Whitesnake cover. This predates that, and Looking Good. 4 songs. This EP is worth picking up if you ever run across a copy. They're kind of hard to find, like I said. They were released independently, and they don't show up very often. In my opinion, if you're looking for a mass EP to check out, I would go with Take You Home over this EP. This one was released on Enigma Records, by the way. Metal Blade Records, 1984, 86. Heretic, Torture Knows No Boundaries. This was the first release from California-based power metal band HERETIC. This band, of course, would go on to release a full-length album with future Metal Church vocalist Mike Howe, and this album was, you know, predates him, had a different vocalist, and but regardless, this was just a fantastic. Again, this is kind of a U.S. power metal album, you know, rides that fence like a Metal Church, where it's pushes the line towards thrash, but never really goes all the way, stays closer into the heavy metal camp. So yeah, again, US power metal. 5 songs on here, all of them essential. This is one of my favorite things I ever recorded. I love the stuff they did with Mike Howe, but I just think this album is more metal, more raw. I think the vocals on here are fantastic. And this band would reform in later years with Glenn Rogers on guitar, and the original vocals would return, and his name is escaping, which is the reason I haven't said it yet. But regardless, just a fantastic album. Metal Blade Records, HERETIC, heavy metal, great guitar solos, great riffing. It's just, if you like Metal Church, if you like Vicious Rumors, those kind of things, you'll dig HERETIC. Oh, by the way, this band right here pretty much became Reverend in later years. After Mike Howe left to join Metal Church vocalist David Wayne went on to join most of the guys from HERETIC, and those guys performed Reverend. Now this EP, this is the best thing that Reverend ever recorded. I like their whole catalog, but they never recorded anything quite as good as this again. This will rival anything in the Metal Church catalog, in my opinion. There's David Wayne, who has since passed away. And then you've got guitarist Brian Corbin, who is right... Where are you, Brian? Oh, there he is. Brian Corbin, who is still out there doing things, still out there making noise, playing the clubs with Reverend. With Reverend, with HERETIC. Again, 4 songs. What do we got in here? Power of Persuasion, Dimensional Confusion, Wretched Excess, and Ritual. Every song in here is essential, every song memorable. This is, again, one of those ones that's going to leave you wanting for more. Released on the Carolina label. This thing's a bit hard to find on vinyl. I believe this was released in 1980, had to be 88 or 89, somewhere in that area. Very, very good stuff. Always kind of dug the cover, even though it's obviously very Spinal Tap-ish. But regardless, great album from Reverend. Pretty much all the same guys from HERETIC, with the exception of David Wayne on vocals. I walked into a mall one time looking for some new music. John Berlaga, who owns Rock Jeans Records, was in there looking through things too. And I pulled this album out, and both of us kind of looked at it and like, yeah, that's a great album, because of the guitar player who's on here. This is Chris IMPELLITTERI. This 4-song EP, generally referred to as the IMPELLITTERI Black Album, was the first album that I knew of to feature Rob Rock, although obviously he was in the Mars Project before this. Man, this guy is just a powerhouse vocalist. Then you got a total shredder in Chris IMPELLITTERI. I mean, this guy was, you know, in the similar style to Yngwie, but a little tamer. I actually think Chris IMPELLITTERI was a better songwriter. You know, it wasn't all about just showing off and playing as fast as you could, or trying to be totally impressive. When he lets go, and he can impress. But the songs are there. Rob Rock has so much melody to his voice, so it's heavy and it's got that shredding guitar, but it's also got those memorable melodic vocals from Rob Rock, who went on to do several albums with IMPELLITTERI. He left the band after this one. They did one album with Graham Bonnet, and then he came back and he's just released a ton of stuff ever since. I pretty much own everything this band has released, and it was because of this EP. Listen to it over and over and over again. This was 1987. I actually have this on CD too. I have a Japanese pressing that's signed by Rob Rock. Got to meet him in where was it? Switzerland when I played there with Once Dead. I was in college when this came out, and my college roommate will testify I drove him nuts. I played this over and over and over again. Speed metal. I believe they're from Minneapolis, Michigan. So I don't know. They're from somewhere over there in the U.S. Speed metal, thrash metal, whatever you want to call them. This is a 5-song EP. Terminator, Hunter Seeker, Gimme Gimme Shock Treatment, which of course is a Ramones cover, and Blinding the Blind. So 4-song EP, and every song awesome, including the Ramones cover. Could not wait for the band to release their full-length album, which they finally did, and it is as fantastic as this. Again, this band tends to be more on the thrash speed metal side, but they pull it back a little bit, and at times they almost have that power metal thing going on, especially on the follow-up album. But here, it's just The Madness Begins. It's kind of a title that'll lead you to believe exactly what this music sounds like. It's insanity, speed, craziness, high-pitched vocals, kind of in the, you know, the John Sears Agent Steel sound. Just a great album, and there's just nothing I don't like about this. Warning, due to the intense nature of the music, neck braces may be required. Indeed. Alright, getting through this one, yeah, I mean, come on, this one had to be included. How many times did I play this album when I was in high school? I liked this one so much, I painted this logo on the back of my denim vest in high school. I actually ended up painting the Warning album, but I took off that logo and used this one, because this logo is fantastic. This is, in my opinion, the best thing that Queensryche ever recorded. It's a shame they didn't record the Prophecy for this as well and get that same raw sound they had on these 4 songs. They did record that song later on as a B-side, but great EP, Queen of the Reich, Knight Rider, Blinded, The Lady Wore Black. This is the EMI release. It was originally released on a private label and then picked up by EMI and launched this band's career. They became a mega huge band, but nothing they did after this sounded quite like this. And I'm not saying I don't like the other stuff, I do, but this EP just flat out rules. Queen of the Reich, one of the coolest songs ever. I mean, I remember I used to make mixtapes back in the day, and it would go on every one I did. That and Fast as a Shark by Accept. Those 2 songs, they defined metal to me. So, last 2, I'm getting long-winded here. Sorry. New Jersey, New York-based TT Quick. Again, this is number 2 in the list. Again, one of those bands I discovered early on. Actually, I discovered them because this was painted on the back of a guy's denim vest. And so I looked into them, found out they were a local band, bought this EP, and I played it over and over and over again. Wore the grooves out. I mean, if possible, I would have wore one side out through the other side. 5 songs, Go for the Throat. Killer song. Almost pushing to the speed metal boundaries. Fortunate Son, Child of Sin, Metal Man, one of my all-time favorite TT Quick songs, and Victims. Fortunate Son, of course, being a John Fogerty CCR cover, so I don't know if you can see it real well or not, but I did get to meet vocalist Mark Tornillo, who went on to sing for Accept, and I had him sign this. Unfortunately, the silver pen didn't work all that great. You can see it okay, it's just hard to see it in the video. Last one, and this album came in the mail less than a week ago, and I wish I would have recorded opening it because my jaw hit the floor, and I'm not even kidding. I just stood there in stone silence with my mouth wide open looking at this. Heathens Rage EP. This is my #1 wanted grail for 10 years are running. I had this back in the day. One of my closest high school friends, who I'm still friends with to this day, was one of the guitar players. His name was Tony Lee. And I sold it back then. I got involved in some stuff that I won't get into here. But this showing up in my mailbox, unbelievable. It came anonymously. I immediately kind of knew who it was that sent it, because there's only one person I ever really told how important this record was to me in my life. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I played this EP back when I was in high school. Saw this band live 10, 20 times. I don't even know how many times I saw them live. Went to their band practices, hand drew their logo for them. This one here, not this one. I don't know who drew this one, but I drew this one for him. And it was just, this album is just very important to me. I just love it. First of all, I think this band should have been much bigger. I think they should have been signed. They were turned down by Metal Blade, even for Metal Massacre releases, multiple times, and I can't understand why. Knights of Steel is freaking brilliant. The vocals by Bob Pizarro, just high, soaring, clean, over the top, shattering glass, but he was unique. He didn't sound like, you know, Jeff Tate. He could sing the Jeff Tate stuff. He could hit those notes. Matter of fact, I remember I went to see Black Sabbath on the Born Again tour, and it was me, Tony Lee, Bob Pizarro, and a few other guys were all hanging around outside of the Spectrum in Philadelphia, waiting to get inside, and we were talking music, and all of a sudden, we must have been talking about Queensryche, and Bob just lets out, "The Queen of the Reich," and just hits that high note, and just, psh, it was freaking awesome. But anyhow, great band. Pretty much the main guy for the band was Rob Warner, who was on guitar. He kept this band going through into the 80s, right up until, I believe it was like in 89, they changed their name to, was it 89? Somewhere around that area, they changed their name to Warner. But yeah, it's unfortunate that they just never were afforded the opportunity to record a full-length album for a proper label. They do have a lot of demo material, and you can get that stuff. It was re-released on vinyl from a Greek label. 2 albums full of fantastic stuff, and you've been listening to it in the background the entire time. So there you go, the Heathens Rage EP, sent to me anonymously. I do know who sent it. Wasn't sure if I was going to say it, but considering the fact that he sent it anonymously, I thought I probably should just keep it anonymous. So all I can tell you, he's a very close friend of mine, and that's it. So there you go, some of my favorite 80s EPs. Long video, sorry for that, but it was a lot to show. So hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to cut it now. Happy New Year 2018, and that's it. God bless. Stay strong.